Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, the Red Raiders fend off a conference foe westward and land a new offensive coordinator.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you, breaking in for a little Friday edition of Locked On Texas Tech as the news continues to roll. The Red Raiders have also continued to roll as far as their searches for coordinators. Sheil Wood, the named defensive coordinator a day ago, and now even before what was thought to be kind of an end-of-the-week sort of deadline, we get a resolution being reported that Mack Leftwich is soon to be the new man offensively for Texas Tech. And this was one of two names you and I kind of most recently left off with. We were still talking about kicking tires on Jake Spavital, and you mentioned very prominently Mack Leftwich, formerly now of Texas State fame, and looks like that'll be the direction the Red Raiders are going to head.
Yes, after dining at Las Brisas and a lot of rumors about plane activity and all the things going on as it related to, is there a mystery candidate, this and that? I think it came down to, who else? I will never maybe know ultimately who was actually talked to and offered this job. Maybe there was nobody else other than Mack Leftwich that was actually offered it. It was maybe more of a gauge interest or what do you think about this guy, whatever. But it seemed to kind of start to hone in on one of these two, and Mack Leftwich is the one that's it makes sense because when you start connecting a lot of these dots, especially with the head coach at Texas Tech, because he is extremely close and has a lot of respect for Eric Morris, the head coach at North Texas. And this is the, I guess the right word would be protege of Eric Morris. So you have that connection. I mean, Joey can call Eric and say, tell me, like, fill me in, like what is he about? What are we getting? Take me through the good, the bad, the ugly, all the good, whatever you're wanting to know. Then there's a couple of other things is that Joey knows GJ Kinney very well and has for years. I think he talked to Coach Kinney, who's the head coach at Texas State, multiple times prior to when the Red Raiders played Arizona State, because they played on that Thursday before. It was an ESPN game between Arizona State and Texas State. And so, you can call Coach Kinney about anything that Mack Leftwich is about. Then you also, if you keep going, you also have the fact that Clay McGuire up at Washington State worked with Coach Leftwich for a couple of months before Eric, I think, got the job at Incarnate Word and took Leftwich with him. And that's where though that Coach Leftwich started to really call it, and whether it be play calls and all those things. So Eric Morris gets a lot of credit here, I think, for what the kind of coach that Coach Leftwich is, and everybody that I've talked to says nothing but great things. Great guy. He is young, and I get that there may be some people that are hung up on that, but he's young and really good at what he does. I happen to be very old and bad at what I do, so it's I'd rather be in the Leftwich category for sure.
You sure are employed by many for a guy that's bad at what he does. A lot of people fooled.
I was going to say I can't keep track of all the different jobs that I've got. But like Ben Arbuckle, which this is all somewhat kind of connected, but like Ben Arbuckle, who's now the OC at Oklahoma, that was Zach Kitley's protege. Zach Kitley, the mentor, Arbuckle, the mentee, Eric Morris, the mentor, Mack Leftwich, the mentee. That's just kind of how. And so as we skip ahead, Mack Leftwich, as the dominoes started to fall, Kitley goes here, Arbuckle goes there, Spavital wants to stay put, whatever. There's a lot of schools that started to have a lot of interest in Coach Leftwich. I think that, as we had mentioned, Utah had been mentioned very prominently. I think that was very real. I think whether the Sam Houston head job was realistic or not, I'm not sure. And then you also had rumors and reports and everything that University of Houston was in play, and that so was University of Arizona. So it was pretty clear that Coach Leftwich was going to have an opportunity, should he want it, to move up, help his family out, and just at 30 years old, as far as a newer salary and a new challenge and all those things. So it was kind of like pick where you want to live, pick who you want to work with, pick who you want to coach, and all that stuff. And yeah, it appears that Texas Tech going to land him, and he's going to get, it sounds like, a 3-year contract. And that makes sense because he had some leverage here. He had, and I'm sure he wants some job security and all that stuff. But man, he's coached 2 top 15 offenses at Texas State the last couple of years, and I don't think and we can get into kind of what this is going to look like now, but I don't think you'll notice a ton of change with the way that you run things.
It wasn't like a prereq coming into this for me, but putting somebody out of sorts within the conference as far as an opponent was kind of becoming appealing, just as a coincidental byproduct of, like taking somebody away from Baylor. And you thought, all right, well, yeah, I wouldn't mind both results there if that's the guy you wanted. And you don't take him away from someone necessarily, but to think about keeping him out of the loving embrace of Utah, that feels good too. So I kind of like that. Also, of course, we know defensively you did take a guy away from an in-conference foe in Houston, but just some interesting things to note as we move forward, and some of those maybe pop up on your schedule or don't. But nonetheless, I like that part of it as well. Knowing he was sought after by someone who is, really looking for a quick change. Obviously, like Utah, there's plenty of motivation there to get the train back on the tracks, but sounds like he'll be headed for Lubbock instead. So you kind of allude to it there stylistically, similarities or differences, or do you have a feel for some of what to anticipate as far as how it's going to look?
Yeah, and the other thing that I like about this.
Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can bet only $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and a whole lot more, all in one place. So when you get a hunch, a gut instinct in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a gut feeling again, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
And the other thing that I like about this, and I thought in some ways this could have been not a detriment, but one of the caveats that came with this job as it's currently set up is that you're not going to mess with the rest of your offensive staff. I think that was very important to Joey, and that may not be as attractive to every candidate out there. They may be like, I want to have this guy or this guy with me. I'm just not going to, roll in here. But obviously there's some connections and some familiarity with some of that. So I personally like that. I could see where like a Coach Leftwich or Coach Pavital or whoever you were talking to would have been like, but anyway, he's just going to slide right in. And I think everything on that side of the ball stays as is, unless somebody on that side gets another job, but they're not leaving to Florida Atlantic or anything like that. I think that Zach did not want to mess with that, and probably couldn't have afforded some of the guys with what they're making to take them to Boca Raton. As far as the terminology goes, I think it will largely be the same. There'll be some differences for play calls and just what they call things. I do think so. I think Kitley there was a lot of personnel groups There's a lot of tight end. There was a lot of different things. I think whereas if you when you look at Coach Spavital, it was like almost opposite. Not much motion, not a lot of personnel groups per se. Pretty static, if you will. Here's what we are. Here's what we're going to do. Good luck, kind of deal. And all this stuff works, and then when it doesn't, it's like we need more of this or less of that. But that's just how it goes. I think Mack Leftwich is somewhere in between those. Some formation, some motion, some different personnel groups. I think that people have made a big deal about the way he splits out his wide receivers out really wide at times, trying to spread the field out. I think they will want to be balanced, very similar to what Zach was wanting to do. They will take shots down the field. They want to run the ball. And some of this, honestly, and a lot of this is going to be dictated by what they get done in the portal and then what he's working with. Do I lean this here, or do I lean that way, or do we want to major and minor, and what do we want to do? So some of that is to be determined, but he's got to come in being pretty excited about having not one but two quarterbacks that can go. That's the biggest thing. There's also maybe an offensive lineman at Texas State, that I think you already had some interest in. It was previously at Colorado. So we'll see if there's anything else at Texas State that would maybe want to play here as well. But that schematically and all those things, that some of that remains to be seen based on what you can get done with your roster and what that looks like.
The staff component is a really interesting one.
Yeah, it is.
Did you anticipate it kind of turning out that way coming into the process? Do you think it developed that way as you consider different candidates? I mean, how typical is it that you have a hiring head coach dictating that to any coordinator in your experience? Hey, things are going to remain in place.
Yeah, and I think that's your wish. It doesn't mean that it will be that way, but I think that's what's going to happen here. And I think it's we could just look at both sides.
So it wasn't like a requirement necessarily. I mean, it's something they wanted, I guess, but it wasn't like.
Yeah, I think Joey would have fought hard to have everything else stay in place. But again, not everybody's going to be okay with that. But I think Coach Leftwich, he may have looked at that as a positive. Like, man, I don't have to go find this or that or whatever. And he's only 30. I mean, how many people does he know? Kind of thing. I mean, we saw that with.
That's true too.
Yeah,
and that's tough though. I mean, just thinking about the high stakes of these kinds of jobs and coming in.
Sure.
Be a tough spot to have to develop a relationship kind of on the fly.
It's all about trust. And I think that those guys here clearly work well together. And obviously Clay already knows him and all that. But look at it. You had a top 10 offense and you lose the coordinator and the coordinator's not taking anybody. So you would probably be wise to want to keep this intact. But the flip side is, look at the other side of the ball. You have a defensive coordinator that you moved on from. You're trying to turn that and upgrade it. And so I would guess that Coach Wood is going to bring in at least one individual with him and maybe more. And so all bets are off on that side of the ball, I would say. So we'll just kind of see what shakes there. And it's also important to note, on that side of the ball, Tim DeRuyter wasn't coaching a position, which is very rare. He didn't have a specific position assigned to him. That's why Marcel Yates was a DB's coach. So I bet what you see happen on that side is I bet you see him coach linebackers, which is what he's done. And that's what most DCs do. And then I bet you end up filling a corners spot and a safety spot. That would be my guess. Or you can, you can do however you want to divide it up. And maybe Darcel McBath fits into one of those spots, and maybe somebody off of that Houston staff that follows Coach Wood fits one of those spots. We shall see. But that's very different than what the offensive side of it was. Not that was hey, here's the job, here's how it's going to be, you want it or not. No, I don't think that's how it went. But I think that largely you would like to have kept most of what you had intact. One, because your current players may, want to know a lot of that side of the ball, or it's like, man, I don't know any of these guys, I'm out. There's just a lot that factors into that. So
well, and It probably should be more obvious. I was thinking immediately about the offensive line situation because that's the most important situation on any team. And you had just made a change there. It is with a guy that I was glad to have back on campus. So there is some bias as far as, believing a guy can do a job or not when it comes to Clay McGuire. But mostly you just made that change. And so you kind of have that spot thinking, all right, maybe this is an exception. But then you think about it and you think about it in the backfield with Kenny Perry. Or somebody like Juice Johnson. I mean, these are McGuire's boys. So it's also like, hey, you think these are going to be, guys that are going to be shuffled in and out? I doubt it if you were just kind of going through the process of elimination. But that would sort of be an enchanted transition if you can sustain that success, keep those guys in place, kind of meld some new relationships. Obviously, that's the best case outcome. And I'm sure much easier said than done, Chris. It'll be a work in progress for a period of time. And I'm sure that might even last into the season. So it'll be really interesting to see how that comes together, if that's the way that the dust settles. And we still got some time, obviously, where things could be moving and shifting.
And Joey had said this at his press conference yesterday on Wednesday, that he wanted to have somebody in place by Friday afternoon, if not sooner, and he's going to stick to that. Now you've given yourself the best chance to attack the portal and go at it this way with what is largely in charge. So it was some stressful 72 hours or so where you're kind of there's an unknown. You feel vulnerable. Our pets' heads are falling off, and you don't know who's in charge. I'll tell you what I still don't know is I have no idea. And you're about to get this announcement on Sunday afternoon, but I don't know how the bowl game looks. Who's calling offense and defense? That's a lot to ask a new guy to come in that doesn't, I mean, maybe they could get some practices under their belt and they could go. That's just a lot to ask. And if I was one of those guys, I'd be like, hey man, can I just like watch that one and just kind of see and evaluate? I don't know if you know what I mean. So I don't know what that looks like yet. We'll see, because it's been done before. It's somewhat rare, but yeah,
where a new hire would be in place.
Yeah, and is already kind of calling plays or in charge of this or that. I mean, that's just a bit tricky. So we'll have to see what that looks like as we get into next week on kind of how who you're playing and who's in charge and all those kinds of things, because these guys just got here. And they need to be focused on recruiting and filling out roster for next year as much as anything. So.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned recruiting, because it's kind of funny. You're telling these guys at the same time, welcome to Lubbock, and here is the group of players we've just assembled for you. Hope you like them, because literally as National Signing Day is happening, these moves are being made with these coordinators. So just wanted to ask you about takeaways from National Signing Day. Included a bit of a surprise factor as well, so that's always fun. But what did you make of the goings-on as one of the National Signing Days comes to pass?
Yeah, and this is it's just like if we didn't have enough going on, just drop this in the middle
Right.
of the deal. It was as expected. They pull. I think he had actually switched it over the weekend or even late last week. They pull a tight end prospect that was previously committed to Arizona. That was a bit new to the folks that follow this closely. Everything else stayed put. The one, I guess the biggest piece of news was late in the day, and Joey hinted at this, and it seemed like very obvious that this was a strong possibility if you follow the social media aspect. But Connor Carty, a 4-star Rivals 250 offensive lineman who's former high school teammates with Ellis Davis. So A&M ended up getting somebody, and maybe there wasn't enough room at A&M, and so then it's like here comes everybody after Connor Carty. TCU's after him, and Texas Tech, and there's a whole bunch of folks just like, hey man, we'd like to be in the Connor Carty business. Well, anyway, he's going to end up coming to Texas Tech, and this wasn't necessarily a spot that you previously had planned on. So I think this makes your 6th offensive lineman that you signed, which I'd be willing to bet you that doesn't affect your portal spots. However, this is just how this stuff is going to work, folks. But I'd be willing to bet you that this is going to affect somebody's spot that's currently on the team that goes through spring and maybe doesn't do as well as was what is needed. And they have to have tough conversations. That there's just only so many spots, and you want to take a chance on this young man. He's got a ton of upside, a ton of size, and all that. But it comes with, there's just only going to be so many spots here. So if you've been on campus for a year or two, and you're still kind of in that third team range, Connor Carty may have just taken your spot. And you may not even know it yet, but that won't be determined until I bet we get through spring and the second portal. But that's kind of what comes with this. So that's a fun addition right there. That's those are the ones you just can't know. Yeah, we'll find a spot for you. Yeah, we'll send you the paperwork right now. We'd love to have you.
Yeah. So no doubt. And when it comes at a spot that really matters,
sure,
get you kind of excited to have that kind of addition. Of course, only time will tell how these guys factor in, or as some always do not factor into the future plans of the Red Raiders. But on National Signing Day, we love all the guys. Glad we got them. It's all for a reason. Everybody's loving everybody. So interesting one to take in. And Chris, before we get out of here, one you took in from United Supermarkets Arena as we turn to the hardwood winds up a 76-62 win for Grant McCaslin and the Red Raiders. A 76-62 win for Grant McCaslin and the Red Raiders over DePaul. Certainly want to get to what we saw on the floor, but notable news prior to tip-off as we learned that JT Toppin was not going to be available for Texas Tech. Any background on how we've gotten here with JT and maybe what the immediate future could hold as far as the outlook?
Yeah, it seems to be minor, and I think thankfully, but no way to know. The tricky time frame here is that you play A&M on Sunday, but then you're off for a week, and so this needs to be something that you are trying to worry about the big picture. So you have to take care of this young man. He's crucial. I mean, if he's were to be lost for a lengthy period of time, you're in serious trouble. That's just all there is to it. He doesn't really have a backup with everything that he can provide. Averaging 18 and 11. Okay, so we were and you played a very finesse type of team with DePaul. This is a team that reminded me of not quite as old, not quite as big, but similar schematically to BYU last year. They wanted to play 5 out, zip the ball around, really get you chasing after everything. And then they needed to be able to knock down plenty of threes. They came in averaging a little over 12 makes a game. They ended up making 11 of them. The problem is that 9 of those were in the first half. So you guarded the arc well in the second half and got that squared away. But in the first half, I mean, they started to go bombs away on you. And that was because, I mean, you're up 14-0. You're like, man, DePaul's in trouble. But they come back all the way back and take a lead at some point in the first half. And then you go to the locker room with a 1-point lead. So it was and those teams are scary because the 3-point shot is a great equalizer. But I was worried about, rebounding. And if you're going to switch everything when you play 5 out, at points you had Federico, on their point guard out, 20 feet from the basket. And you're like, oh, this may not be good. But that's just part of what comes with it. That's where JT Toppin is, because he can guard all 5 spots on the floor and probably do it fairly well. But I thought D5 played really well. Chance McMillan played really well. I was worried about Kerwin Walton, did not have his best game. He played 17 minutes, only had 1 rebound. But other than him, your guards rebounded well. I think Kevin Overton had 6 boards. I think McMillan and D5 both had 5 or 6 rebounds and things like that. So this was a good win, and now you just need to root for DePaul going forward because you gave them their first loss. But their scheme alone will give folks some problems, and they're really well coached. But this is one of the worst jobs in the country that Chris Holtman took over for. And to this point, they've been one of the best stories in the sport because of how bad they were. They've had 1 500 or better season in the last, I think it's 15, 16 years. And they were 3-29 last year, and then bounce out to a 7-0 start. So I'll take it. But now your focus turns to the Aggies, and that will be a brawl. I'd like to have my man JT with me in said brawl, but we shall see.
No doubt. I thought it was one of Chance McMillan's best games as a Red Raider, and kind of was sort of him at his best in all areas, because I thought he was disruptive on the defensive end, had a few steals. I thought he was competing on the glass. And then, of course, you know what he can do offensively, both from beyond the arc and getting to the rim also, and doing some work there in the front court as well. I thought I'd love to just go ahead and tell Chance we'll take this every night if you just want to make this a consistent thing. Sure, there'll be some highs and lows still to come, Chris. But if you sort of ask me what does Chance McMillan look like at his best when he's really at his best in all aspects, I thought it kind of looked like what it did last night. And the Red Raiders are going to need him, obviously. It goes without saying, to really step up and be a consistent presence in the Big 12 Conference. So I thought that was a lot of fun to watch him have that kind of day.
Yeah, because when a guy like Toppin is out, and then with whatever Cambridge's situation is, some of these guys are having to elevate or play more minutes, but as you see, Chance and Darion are just both really good. They have been what you would have hoped, in that they were pretty good last year, but they both kind of have or are in the process of taking next steps to be really like mainstays and like key cogs in what you're doing, because you're asking them to do more. They're not just ancillary parts into what you've got going right now. They need to produce night in and night out, but it's just it's fun to watch them kind of flourish. And Chance was, when he scores like he did, and he kind of handled a lot of the ball handling duties in the tail end of the game. That's been what's fascinating is Elijah Hawkins has these spurts, but he hadn't been in the game in some of the end of game scenarios. And for all the things that Hawkins does well, there's some things that he can get you in trouble with a little bit. Now, he only had one turnover the other night, but it is, he's limited, but there's also things that he's exceptional at. So it's just been interesting watching, like, when you get down the stretch or when it gets to crunch time in certain games, he's not in the game. And Chance and Darion and those guys are kind of handling all that, or even a Christian Anderson. So, because I first noticed that when you were in Brooklyn, you're playing St. Joe's and it's in Nipatuck, you're trying to make a comeback. Hawkins wasn't in the game. So everybody's adjusting to a new role, and it's all takes a little bit of compromise here. And I think Grant's still trying to figure out who needs to do what and all that. But to your point, I think he knows that I need Chance and Darion in the game as much as we can. Those
we need it all, boys.
Yes, they are good on both ends of the floor. Great teammates, and all stand for the right things for sure.
Go ahead and empty the bucket every night out. It'll take just about all of that, and probably a little bit more to get through the Big 12 Conference. All right, Chris, good stuff as always, man. Appreciate you dropping in with some reaction on the new hire for Texas Tech offensively in Mack Leftwich. And still don't know what the week could bring before we get her all wrapped up. So make sure you're subscribed out there on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you don't miss a thing. Chris, enjoyed it as always, man, and we'll see you for the next one.
And I feel like I know you would know these people too, but I know the owners of Las Brisas, and I feel like they got some free pub here. But hey, man, we'd love to. Calvin and I would love to set up shop and have people taking our picture at some secret dinners too, and then have it become news if there's any potential hiring or whatever, because that cracks me up. Lubbock is a big city, but it ain't that big.
It's the biggest little town you've ever lived in.
People were, it's great. I'm like in the middle of the basketball game last night, and I'm getting these pictures. I'm like, what am I looking at? It's like Joey sitting with Coach Leftwich at Las Brisas. I'm like, this is just great. This town is awesome. Yeah. But
probably served him a ribeye too, because since they apparently closed the deal, doesn't sound like they were serving him a chicken breast. That's what you probably would have gotten in Salt Lake City. Turn you on to some chicken fingers or something.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Okay, well, we are in the midst of it right now. We will be talking fairly soon about roster and bowl game and who's in, who's out, what all this looks like, whatever staff changes come with all this. So we're maybe through a portion of the phase here, but we still got a long way to go before everything's back to normal.
That's right. if that is such a thing. Normalcy? I don't know. Will we even recognize it if it hits us in the face? Not quite sure, but it's been a lot of fun so far this week to observe the always interesting goings on for Texas Tech, as we have not even gotten to the off season yet. Still got a bowl game coming up, by the way. Season is still technically ongoing. Appreciate you guys being out there as always. Again, get subscribed or hit the show notes to find the link there to become a Matador Mobster. Your direct line to Chris and myself with one-on-one text sent straight to your phone. You can try on a free 14-day trial just by hitting that link again in the show notes. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.